If you can't hear me, signals from the back will be useful, but probably I'm going to speak too loud and too fast. That's the most likely thing that's going to happen as I talk about thriving with intensity. So, a little bit about me. This is my corporate persona. I have a two-part coaching practice. The first is leadership development for people in their professional careers, and this is the person they hire. The other part of what I do is working with gifted and twice exceptional adults and parents of gifted and twice exceptional children. I run self-care classes with Jen Merrill and do coaching, and don't tell my non-self-identified clients this, but every single one of my clients is gifted and or twice exceptional. Most of them won't admit it, so I show them this side. But this is the part of me that they fall in love with. This is me 2 weeks ago in the Alps. I went on vacation. My brother talked me into it. I haven't been hiking seriously in 30 years. And at Christmas, I was saying, well, my kids are going to be with their dad for 2 weeks early in the summer, and I don't know what I'm going to do with all that time to myself. But I'd kind of like to get into shape. I'd kind of like to go somewhere I haven't been before, and I'd really like to go somewhere that my language skills are dodgy, because I haven't done that in 20 years. And my brother said, you're going to walk the Tour de Mont Blanc. It's 170 kilometers. I did it last year. It was gorgeous. And I was like, well, that would get me in shape. And he showed me his pictures, and I was like, oh my God, that's gorgeous. And I went, but I can't afford it. And he said, well, maybe. But if you come in July, I'm going to be hiking in the Alps, and I will buy you gelato in Chamonix if you were there on the 3rd of July. And I was like, all right, I'm in. So for €3 and gelato, you can bribe me. For those of you who already know something about overexcitabilities, there are at least 3 of the 5 overexcitabilities in that story. I will leave you to connect the dots. Okay. One of the things about overexcitabilities is that sometimes sitting and breathing is not the way we come to peace. So for those of you who need to move, take a deep breath and let it out on a sigh. Oh, come on, you can sigh bigger than that. And one more, because 3 is a magic number. Shake out a hand. Shake out your other hand. Shake out a leg. Shake out another leg. Shake out whatever you're sitting on. Give your face a little smush. And just check in with your skin. We're going to talk about mindfulness just a little bit later in the presentation. Mindfulness is really tricky for people with psychomotor overexcitabilities, and this kind of getting present through a physical activity is a super useful tool. You've already learned something useful, take it with you. The theory of overexcitabilities comes from Dabrowski and his theory of positive disintegration. A lot of people who talk about overexcitabilities don't locate overexcitabilities deeply enough in the theory, and it limits what they can do with them and how they can be useful. So the inner forces at work that cause great pain and are triggers for personal development are what we're going to be talking about today, and what we're going to be talking about is the positive development that can happen out of those discomforts. The word overexcitabilities is a translation headache, literally superstimulatability. Supersensitivities also gets used. There are some other translations that have happened into English in the past. I'm going to use sensitivity, intensity, supersensitivity, and overexcitability interchangeably in this talk. The reason for that is I don't like the judgment in over when we talk about overexcitabilities. And I'm kind of on a personal mission to get us to take the negative judgment out of the word, and language matters. So in the spirit of Comic-Con, these are our superpowers. These are the 5 categories of experience that sensitivity shows up. If you already know them, you've probably figured out which is which already. But for those of you who aren't familiar with the 5 categories of supersensitivity, here in the books, this is intellectual. This is the classic gifted in school. I gotta know why, I need all the depth, I need all the nuance. This angry man has obviously been stimulated to an intense emotion. The emotions are a realm where just sensitivity in all sorts of arenas. It can be awe, wonder, sadness, confusion, whatever the feelings are, a tendency towards extreme emotions, emotional overexcitability. Castles in the sky, imaginational overexcitabilities. These are our dreamers, our inventors, the world in my head is much more interesting than the world outside my body. This tag will itch. How many people in this room have a sensitivity to tags and clothing issues? Yes. Sensory sensitivity in any of the realms of the typically thought of 5 senses fall into this category. And finally, we have Tikar, my favorite example of psychomotor overexcitabilities. Why walk into a room when you can bounce? Yes. When the world is a complicated place and the people and culture around you try and put it in neat and tidy boxes, and your experience doesn't fit in the neat and tidy box, the only appropriate response is to push the box. Because when you try and fill yourself into the little tiny box and leave all those other pieces out, bad things have a tendency to ripple out as effects. So Escher is one of my favorite artists. And for me, this image of metamorphosis is one of the best images of psychological development that I know. We start with some kind of natural tendencies. Anybody who's ever seen an infant and realized that they come with some tendencies already ingrained, then through development we shift and change, and we go through phases and become something completely different. And then we go through another shift and we become something slightly different. And then we go through another shift, and the next thing you know, we've gone from being a lizard to being a chessboard. The experience of going through those transitions often psychologically feels like we don't know who we are, we don't know what's going on, and if you look at this, there are places where it's particularly clear in the bees to fish section. If you look at the sections, there are just shapes that are like, yeah, I'm not really fish or fowl, I'm something in between, but if you see it in the big context, it's part of the transition. The thing about positive disintegration is that when we get a new stimulation, get a new stimulus from the outside, we have to open ourselves up in order to be able to take it in. Otherwise, we just reject it. Cognitive bias is in that place of I just refuse to see the things that will make me stretch. There are 3 things that can happen once we've opened ourselves up. One is that we can stay opened up and not quite one thing or another for a very long period of time, which ends up really bad for most people involved. This is a place that leads you into psychosis and mental breakdown and not being able to function. We can decide to reject the new thing. Negative disintegration, we just go back. Positive integration, we can actually assimilate the new information and become something more whole. And I love this quote from Jesse Ministo because it connects who we are with our authentic values and the positive outcomes when we reintegrate as something healthier, more whole, more us. So what I'm really going to talk about today is what are the tools that we can use in these moments of disintegration to make it more likely than not that we end up positively reintegrating at the end. But before we get there, I want to have a look at values and the overexcitabilities. So we got 5 rows here and 5 rows here. Turn to the people in your row, and if you're in the first row, look at intellectual overexcitability. See if you can come up with a hero who manifests, who shows that, what the shadow side is of that overexcitability, a value that might be in there. So a value of always asking why in the intellectual space is that you actually get to uncover the full complexity of something. Science is completely grounded in always asking the next deeper question. A job that might use that excitability in a positive way, and something kids might do that is a positive manifestation of the overexcitability. So first row, talk to each other intellectual. Second row, emotional. Third row, sensory. Fourth row, imaginational. And psychomotor. Just take a couple of moments and see if between you can come up with one thing for each of the boxes.
When you say hero,
Like a celebrity or a hero or somebody who's a positive role model in that space. Whether you finished or not. Did every group come up with something that fits one or two of those?
Yes.
Can I just get one box filled in from this group? One thing that you noticed here. Yep, hang on a second. Those of you who are in the back still working, we're going to move on. I can leave because we're going to get some input from other people, because this is a chart that's worth keeping in your mind and taking with you as an exercise to complete for yourself going forward and to work with people. Otherwise, I just want to get a couple of boxes filled in. So one box from your row.
The hero we came up with for emotional is Oprah.
Oprah as an emotional excitability example. Fantastic. What about one from this row? Yeah.
We did Temple Brandon for sensory. She was
Fantastic.
the hero too.
All right, one in the back row?
Oh, us back here. We had psychomotor. We came up with shadow and job. Shadow would be disruptiveness.
Yeah.
Job would be the dancer.
Fantastic. So those are great examples. This is a wonderful chart to actually fill out as an exercise for yourself, because except for the shadow side, the rest of them are all positive. The shadow is the place that we tend to land when we're first thinking about overexcitabilities, but the rest of it is the way to sort of flip it on its head. Parents and teachers need to deal with their own overexcitabilities before they try and work with the overexcitabilities of the children in their care. For several reasons, one of which is that it's just a good life self-care skill to have, and the other one is that if you are dealing with children who have especially intellectual and emotional sensitivities, they see right through you if you try and teach them to do work on themselves that you haven't done on yourself. So, in the title of my talk, I talked about mining for the magic. Mining for gems involves noticing where there might be gems, going into the dark place, identifying the gems in their natural form, which often is covered with dirt and muck and other pieces of rock so they don't sort of gleam out at you when you're going through the mine. And then you have to work them and set them and polish, cut, polish, set them before they turn into art. And so we're going to just talk through this process. What are the signs that this is a process to begin? Bigger than normal reactions. Anxiety, depression, guilt, feeling out of sorts are kind of the ways that these often manifest if they haven't been noticed and there's been judgment placed on people because of their sensitivity. And just a sense that something's got to give. Like there's this, it's not happening and something's got to give. So the trick is to go into that feeling, which is not intuitive. To identify and recognize what is the core ingredient of what is going to be the brilliance of life. Which overexcitabilities are there and how are they manifesting? Different people have different combinations of the things that they're super sensitive to. And they manifest differently. I can have a sensory overexcitability around color. You can have an overexcitability around taste or texture, or maybe for somebody it's the feel of an onion in their mouth, and for some it's the feel of the tomato skin of a raw tomato, which some people might think they're pretty much similar textures. But if you're super sensitive, one of them might be totally fine and one of them might be totally disgusting. So that's how you identify them. If it's not so clear, what pisses you off? What do people tell you you're too much of? And what makes you jump for joy are great questions. But what I really want to look at is how do we work them? The first thing that we have to do is learn to reduce reactivity, help people reduce their reactivity. If the sensation comes in and we immediately react, we're trapped in that place. There's nothing that we can work with. So the first thing to encourage is the pause between the stimulus coming in and the action going out. So we got to put out those fires. This is where mindfulness comes in. Mindfulness is non-judgmental awareness of what's going on. It's just paying attention, noticing, practicing not judging, and practicing not taking action. Practicing are key here, and better is the goal. You start where you're at, the people that you're working with start where they're at. The goal is better. They will die still needing to get better. There will be room for improvement always. Self-care and recovery. All of us have a sense of who we are when we're at our best. Getting back to that moment, practicing getting back to who we are at the best. We need to identify for ourselves what are the practices that help us do that. They're different for each and every one of us. They're different for each and every child that we work with. But we need to identify them and practice them. Stay in the game. This is one of the hardest ones when we're feeling reactive. Lots of times, people want to just get out of the game. That's too hard for me, that overstimulates me, I'm leaving. And sometimes leaving is part of self-care. But if leaving is always the thing that you do, you're not going to grow. Actually staying in, trying again, getting better, practicing. This question, what are you more committed to than what makes you uncomfortable, is a very useful question for staying in the game. Why am I doing this thing that I find challenging? Because what we find is that if we are committed enough to something else outside ourselves, our own inner turmoil traps us less than when we are not focused on accomplishing something that matters to us. So when we've identified what we need to do and calmed ourselves a little bit so there's some choice, reframing the shadow side to something positive gives us something we can grasp on and polish. What would you miss out on if you didn't have this sensitivity? What is the gift that it gives you personally? How does the world need this? And the one I always like to throw at people is, if this is such an awful trait, why did evolution not get it out of the population sooner? What is it that makes it useful for us as a species to have super sensitive people in it? Whatever the facts are about how sensitive your nervous system is in these various places, there is a positive story and a good truth. And that's what we're looking for. And this is actually, to me, the most important part of making the really brilliant changes in our lives from our oversensitivities. It's getting into action, taking it one step outside where we are now. Quite often, either we can see a massive landscape and we don't know how to get the road through from where we are here to where we are there, so we think, I can't see the whole road, I'm not getting started. Sometimes we're in a fog and we can't see anything. And the solution to both situations is exactly the same. One step forward. Because from the next step, you can see the next step. Or you can make your next step. For those of you who know Harold and the Purple Crayon, that's exactly what Harold did. He's got a purple crayon with him and he draws himself into and out of trouble and adventures. Now, we've all got voices inside our head that say, you can't do that. They say all sorts of other things. You're not worthy, you're not good enough, this is too much trouble. We've all got them. Anybody out here not have a voice inside their head that says any of that? Okay, good. You're human, by the way, just so you know. Yeah. What do we do with those voices? One is that we paint silly pictures of them and we laugh at them. We see where they're ridiculous. We see where we can say, you know what, the evidence isn't actually in your favor. The other thing that we can do is just know that those voices crop up every time we try and change something in our lives. Because what's actually going on is there is a part of us that goes, everything is just fine right now. And if you change it, I'm gonna die. So just stop. And I'm afraid those voices never go away. And those voices have access to all of your smarts. So you cannot rationalize with them 100% because they are going to take every weapon that you have at your disposal to fight them with, and they're gonna fight you back with it. So seriously, just put them in the back of the bus with the rowdy kids and drive on the road. Because they can make all the noise they want. If you just say, I'm not listening to you right now, because I got a project I gotta do. You practice that, they stop being such a pain in the ass. This is a great question to get to the heart of how to use these super sensitivities. What makes your heart sing? So just, if you haven't already, answer that question for yourself right now. What makes your heart sing? Do I have a couple of people who are willing to share what makes their heart sing?
Being in nature.
Being in nature. Mm.
Bringing out the best in others.
Bringing out the best in others.
Singing.
Singing.
Bright colors.
Bright colors.
Studying this theory of positive disintegration.
Studying something you're passionate about. Yeah?
Dancing.
Dancing. Yeah. What makes your heart sing is such a statement about who you are. And when you let yourself sing, other people get permission to sing the way they want to. Lots of us work with kids. I have 4 kids who manifest all of these overexcitabilities. Lots of us who have, and I'm going to talk about myself right here, right now, who have super sensitive systems, grew up with shame, a sense of we're too much, a sense of you don't fit in, that was reinforced by society and not counteracted by caregivers. And so what I want to talk about a little bit right now is how do we stop our kids from suffering that kind of damage? Because all of the things that I just talked about work for everybody who's sensitive. But if we can stop the kids from being damaged, so much is possible. Kids are unformed, so we have power to coach and educate them. Coaching brings out the best in people. Coaching has 3 really crucial elements that we can do with all the children in our lives. We can reflect and validate who they are. We can inject positivity into the systems that they're a part of. And we can put them in the driver's seat. Autonomy is something that our gifted and sensitive children crave, and that neurotypical parenting and educational institutions resist giving them hard. I love this picture. When we're reflecting what we see in children back to them, we can reflect back to them that we see them as unformed pawns with the potential of becoming kings. We can reflect back to them that we see the king in them already. We can also reality check them when they see themselves as already the king, and we know that they're still pawns. How do we do this? We just name what we see without judgment. You had this experience and you cried. You had a big emotional reaction to this experience. It must matter to you. We can just leave it at that, and that gives them information that they can work with, that will change how they see themselves. We can validate that their inner experience is real for them. How many would have people in this room were ever told, you're too sensitive? Too sensitive for what? And how do you know how sensitive I am? When nurses and doctors try and find out how much pain a kid's in, and the kid says it hurts a little, the nurses and doctors go, okay, their experience is that it hurts a little. So if my child sees a sunset and goes, oh my God, it's so beautiful, and I'm like, it was just like that yesterday, it's not useful. What I can do for my kids is go, oh my God, you're really moved by that sunset. Because what is true for them is true for them. And my judgment makes no difference. It's still true for them. Injecting positivity. The data is very, very clear that we as human beings respond more powerfully to negative input than we do to positive input. And it takes somewhere between 4 and 8, depending on the situation. Typically at home it's 4, at work it's 8. Positive emotional moments to counteract every single negative emotional moment that we have. So every single time that we can find something good in a situation and name it, we're counteracting somewhere between an 1/8 and a 1/4 of negativity that was done somewhere else. So we got a lot of work to do. Just naming the good stuff. And here's the magic thing. We never know what's going on in somebody else's mind. The only way we find out what's going on in our kids' minds is we ask or we guess, and then we ask them to tell us where we're wrong, because we're wrong most of the time. And the magic question that gets them in the driver's seat. Okay, so we've named this for you. Here's what's going on. What are you going to make up from this? What are you going to make happen from this? What are you going to do from here? Because that gives them knowledge that they have the power to do something. It may be small, it may be limited. If they're in a classroom setting or with a big group of people, there may not be a lot of range that they have autonomy in. But this question will set their brain searching for what it is possible for them to do to take control of the situation. I start with the coaching because it's foundational. So many of us start with the educating. Kids are unskillful and they lack context. It's true. That's what it is. So they need practice and information. And the brighter the kid, the more you can get their brain on your side. I'm going to give you a couple of things right now that are useful tools to put into this might be useful for kids to know for managing their own development. The ladder of inference is a way of understanding when we take action, it's actually built on all sorts of decision making that we've already done, most of it unconscious, about the facts that are in our world. There are all the facts in the world. We selected some of them, and then we've put meanings on them and assumptions on them, made some decisions about them, some of it conscious, most of it not, and then we take action. And lots of the trouble that we get into and that kids get into when their sensitivities are on high alert is the interpretations of what's going on turn into unskillful behaviors. And one of the tools that we can have is to get further and further down the ladder, going, okay, what is the understanding that you have about what's going on? What facts led you to get to that understanding? What other interpretations of the facts might there be in there? And get closer and closer to the fact that table is something I can do something with. It's much easier to work with, hey, I'm really excited about something, something's really influencing me, than it is to go, the whole world's against me. because somebody down the hall looked at me funny, and I went, "Ah, everybody hates me." Now what? I have to take it back. The person who looked at me funny might even not have been looking at me. I might have just walked through their field of vision. Mind blown. Stages of learning. This is one that's really useful for our gifted kids because they tend to have skipped the second stage and sometimes the second and third stage so often that they don't understand what's happening when they don't. So when we don't know something, we don't know that we don't know it. We are unconscious of our own incompetence. And then something happens and we go, oh, wait a minute, there's something out there that I don't know. I came into San Diego on the plane. I didn't know how to get here. I figured I'd use public transportation. How do I do that? How's the San Diego system take payment? What is all of that? I'm consciously incompetent, and there's a discomfort with that. This is the learning place, and the learning practices get you from, I don't know this, to, okay, I figured out that there's a machine at the trolley station that takes cash and will give me a ticket. So the next time I go to a station, I'm thinking, okay, I gotta look for this box and put my money in. I'm consciously competent. I can do it, but I have to think about it. If I lived here for a few months, I would take the trolley without thinking about it. I would just walk to the trolley station and end up on the train, having paid for my ticket without really giving it any thought. In fact, I would probably be thinking about the meeting I was about to have or who I was going to see. Two things it's worth our kids knowing about this. The moment of realizing you don't know something is scary and uncomfortable. It just is. It doesn't stop being just because we're grown-ups. We just get better at being with that discomfort. And the other thing is when we go from being consciously competent to unconsciously being competent, we often freak out. Because yesterday, I had to think really hard to do this thing. And today, I'm doing this thing, but I'm not thinking really hard about it. So part of my brain is scared that I've gone back into unconscious incompetence and I don't know what I'm doing. Because I'm not thinking about it, so I can't be doing it right? Because thinking about it is required for doing it right. But when we acquire a habit and we're not needing to be conscious about it, that's what is going on. Imposter syndrome lives in this place. I can't possibly know what I'm doing because I'm not thinking hard about it. The fact that I have spent 25 years studying it, and therefore it's habitual, notwithstanding. This is another thing that's really useful for our kids to know. How many people have seen Inside Out? So in Inside Out, the story is about emotional figures inside a little girl's head. And the reality is that the way our brain functions is bits and pieces of it turn on and turn off all the time, and they're fighting for attention. And at any one time, the part that's alive and alert is not the whole us. And if we can cultivate an awareness of the part of us that knows that and sees these different parts of us and put that part in the driver's seat, that's where we get to make the choices about which of the reactions we're having we're going to pay attention to. And so if our kids learn and we learn that we don't have to believe all the voices in our heads and that we can make decisions about which ones to believe, this gives us power. So this is a great extra tool. Fundamentally, there are maps and guides to feeling lost in this place of how do I fit in with all this stuff. Their actual experience, our actual experience. People who see you without judgment, who see your own self and accept you and witness you, are the lifeline. What makes your heart sing is the antidote to, oh my God, this drives me crazy. And being of service to things and people that we care about gets us out of our own discomfort and into action in the world in a way that leads to a satisfaction that is bigger than we imagine from the place of being trapped in our own discomfort. this is what it's all about, though. Life is a process of becoming. Series of stages we have to go through. And the overexcitabilities are triggers for evolution. Thank you. So I think we have time for a few questions. If you are interested in my slides, pick up my card, send me an email, I will get them out to people. Yes?
What would you recommend if someone has gotten pretty darn good at suppressing their overexcitabilities, and so it's going to take some effort to give yourself permission to let them come to the surface, to begin to know them?
Yeah. So huge amounts of patience, huge amounts of patience, like making it okay for them to never change levels of patience, and gentle encouragement to notice what's actually going on in their body in the moment. The key, because all of this is about getting to that level of data and reintegrating from that level of data once there's new data in there. And so even if it starts with, how are you breathing right now? The body data is really useful and super gentle.
You said that children adapt skills in context, and that kind of popped my thinking for a minute. I find that children oftentimes come with an array of skills, and maybe some of them are working for them in certain situations and not in others.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so I found myself really very curious about what your experience has been. If you could tell me more about what that means to you.
Well, so absolutely, there's a set of skills that everybody has that they develop starting very, very young. And a lot of them are maladaptive. A lot of the things that we do, in particular dealing with our overexcitabilities in response to being shut down, are to develop habits that serve so well at the stage of development in which the child is. And then when they develop just a little bit more psychological maturity or a lot more psychological maturity, there's not enough flexibility in the skills that they already have to deal with the more complex things, and they have more resources that they're available to them that they've developed in other areas of their life. And if we can open up their minds to go, there are some other things you might try in here, those extra skills, we're just building on what they've already got. But that context that was really useful when you were 2 and is not serving you now that you're 7 is a useful piece of information.
Mindfulness thing with my 7 and 5-year-olds, and I find that they can do it when we're doing it as an exercise, translating that into, I see your body getting tense, and you use some of those, like the wiggles out or whatever was done that day. It's not translating to that point. I didn't know if you had any great piece of advice, because I find like the mindfulness is great only in theory.
Yeah. So part of it is that the form of mindfulness that most of us teach, which is the getting calm, like most of us think of mindfulness as that deep breathing place. That is very slow to translate. Practices make better. Physical attention to what is actually going on in the senses of your body for 2 seconds, practiced frequently, is a really powerful tool. So just notice, non-judgmentally, hey, your fists are clenched right now. Hey, your fists are clenched right now. Hey, your fists are clenched right now. And then, oh, my fists are clenched. Do I have some choice about what's going on? Yeah, and it's slow, so cultivating your own sense of patience with it is gonna serve you really well. Nope, I'm back.
I'm looking at the hero shadow value chart.
Yep.
And I was just curious what you would fill in the blank for value in sensory.
For me, all of art is in that space. Everything aesthetic is in that sensory world. And
Yeah, I love that slide you put up on the painting. And I really struggle with my daughter generally seeing herself as the painter, and wanting to be in the driver's seat and empowered, and not having a really realistic understanding of when she does have that authority or not. And I was wondering, when you're talking about putting them in the driver's seat, how to do that in a way that doesn't take away their power. I'm
So-
not sure if I'm making any sense.
absolutely. So the challenge is at that point what you want to reflect is the greater context. Here are the skills that you have. Here is the impact you try to use them in this way, is having this impact is disruptive in the following way, because these other skills would be useful. Like to actually paint that bigger picture, to reality check her.
Could you give me an example?
So my daughter is naturally talented in art and graphic design, and she refuses to get any guidance. And so there are some simple things she could do to her posters for her homework, like using a ruler to lay out her lettering that would make it pop in a more powerful way. And to just say, what you did is amazing and creative and great. And then I often go, if I were doing it, I would probably have used a ruler and laid it out and done it, and actually do it in front of her. And go, because I see that impact that that negative space has when it's more uniform. And I just label it like that, because if I tell her she's wrong and that she needs to have respect, then that's taking her out of the driver's seat. But what I'm doing is giving her the wider context of there are other options. And then I have to sit back and hope that maybe someday she connects the dots. All right, I think that they may be waiting to come in, so I think we need to wrap this up. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.